Beloved ones, it's Shiloh, Sophia, and Christina Arylo here, and we are inviting you to a conversation that we have as a part of our friendship. And we are in deep inquiry, really, for the past year over this concept of weaving a new world in new ways. What does that look like for us, and what does that look like for the communities that we serve?
What both of us, it's interesting, what happens for us a lot is that we will go off on separate journeys, pilgrimages. Shiloh was just in Mexico, and over the fall I was in Europe, and we come back and we share with each other what we're getting, these downloads that we get from the divine and the inquiries that we're in, and oftentimes they're the same inquiry. Which is trippy. It is a little trippy. We're like, no way, you got the same thing, and we were 10,000 miles apart. But it's also really affirmative, and it is also part of what I think happens as Shiloh and I talk to a lot of the women, such as yourself, that are in our communities. We keep hearing the same threads and the same questions, and so today, as we're just in this new moon of the new year, Shiloh came over to my house with a pot of beans, and Noah made us some coffee for our alchemical coffee mugs. And we've been just even today in this conversation about as you step into this coming year, and not just this year, but it's this year and beyond, we're both feeling like a lot of the systems and structures that have maybe supported us in the past or have worked in the past have been falling apart and shifting, and we're being called to weave in a new way, to create, to create new realities and new systems. And how do you do that? And what does that look like? And what is each of our pieces? What's your piece? What's my piece? What's Shiloh's piece? And so we thought we would just invite you in to share some of the things that we've both been getting, and see if maybe you've been getting some of these things as well.
So welcome to this little cafe. So you might want to get a cup of tea or coffee or a glass of wine, wherever and whenever you're listening to this, and engage with us. This is a little salon. And it's
Pop-up salon.
And before we started hitting the record button, we actually sat and talked for like an hour and a half about what's important to us, and also what's important to you, those that we serve. We are both we both have our own ministries that we've been serving thousands of women for many years now, and yet we both come out of a corporate background. And that's one of the things we're talking about our early beginnings, the power that we had in that old corporate structure, how quickly we catapulted ourselves out of it. And then something that we've been talking about for about 5 years, which is the one that we're in now, also isn't working for us. And that doesn't mean we're making the entire internet or Facebook or like all those systems wrong, because we use them as sacred technology in our businesses, but we really feel energetically, physically, our nervous system, spiritually, our quantum field, it isn't working for us as spiritual beings. And the more deep we go into our sacred spiritual path and walk, which we're both deeply committed to and on, and everything we teach is connected with that, it isn't feeling in alignment with the pace, the energy, the way that information and technology and communication is happening. It doesn't feel supportive of the earth, of the feminine, of us, of our relationships. And now there's a siren that goes off.
It's time for a change. Emergency, emergency.
We love when we record outside and like the saw goes off and the dog starts barking and the siren goes off. There's something wrong.
Well, and we're in the middle of the country, you all. Like we're in the middle of a town that has maybe 1,500 people.
We hear a siren every couple weeks.
Yeah, like
maybe.
that is like, wow, just
so something isn't working well, and the mothers of the women's movement and spiritual and energy movements have been telling us it's now, or like the Hopi saying, the 11th hour you've been waiting, it is here. And we feel it, and we can see it, and we can see it in what's happening in our friendships and our families and our communities, the number of people who are sick, who have lost their houses, who aren't doing well, who aren't feeling connected, who have left their spiritual communities, who are wondering how they got where they got, including us, just like, wow, this is such a curious place we find ourselves in, and where do we go from here? And that we we are super like, we are on our path. And so when we are off of our path, or different times when we haven't been on our path, there's an immediate sense of loss and sometimes despair and doom and like, what is happening, and we don't feel connected. And we know that a lot of you feel like that because you write to us and come to the programs and you talk to us about feeling like, where am I, what's going on? And a lot of us leaving the churches and spiritual institutions of our youth and our families, we think, well, some of us feel like we're not even from this planet. And when we find each other, we stop being so lost. And in our case, we develop systems and patterns, and Christine does Kundalini yoga. I pray to the Virgin and Jesus, and make sacred art. Like, we have these ways that we learn to navigate the challenges of being in the grid, and we shift how we're relating to it as the matrix, which is really has Ma at the beginning and is more of the feminine, even though the internet is sort of based off that energetic coding of the feminine, including the red thread of Ariadne. It's made of stardust, right? So it's like this sacred thing that actually, it can be used for sacred, but is also being used for harm. And it actually isn't working for us. We talk all the time about how do we continue to reach out and serve and actually get off of it somehow. Like, how do we stop communicating in this way? And yet, like, well, to talk to you, we have to do this. So there's a level of consciousness that we keep saying, okay, we're going to engage consciously. And then how do we invite you to engage consciously with us? Sometimes participating in the system, but not actually having the negative effects that come with being enmeshed inside of the system unconsciously.
Well, and I think that, this last year for me was probably one of the most intense years of my life since 2001, when Spirit kicked me into my life instead of like saying kicked me out, it kicked me in to my path, and it opened up the doors to an entirely different reality, and that reality opened me up to remember the power that I had to co-create differently, that the power I had to listen to parts of myself that had been turned off for a long time. And that it wasn't my power. I mean, it was my power for sure, but it wasn't like sitting down and setting a list of goals or, saying, I'm going to go out and I'm going to make this happen. There was like this whole other sphere of mystical sacred technology that I had never been taught in business school or in corporate or in any school. And, part of it is intentional creativity. When I met Shiloh, it was like, we opened up my whole intention, like creativity, symbol, metaphor, color gives us access to things outside of our brain. And this is, I think, one of the things that Shiloh and I were talking about this morning and wanted to invite you into this piece of the conversation, is that if we keep trying to create from what we've known in our mind, so the thoughts that we have, or what we see out there in kind of we call it the madness matrix, or the mundane world, or the base level of human consciousness that is in our mainstream media, will only keep creating what's already been created.
Right. Which is madness.
Which is absolutely madness. And Einstein talks about the imagination. And there's a quote in there. I'm always the worst at quoting people, but there is something in there about, he talks about how imagination is one of the most valuable things that we have.
More important than knowledge.
More important than knowledge. She's always good. She always knows what they actually said. And we discount that in our culture, in our society, and think it's make-believe. But this is what's so freaking cool, is that it's not make-believe. The mystics and the yogis and the spiritual beings that have been on this planet in form for thousands of years have left us tools and have left us ways to access information that isn't in our brain and isn't in a magazine. And when we can tap into that, and it's like we tap into this field where our heart and our soul and our spirit and something way bigger than us exists.
Yeah, and it's there all the time. But unless we choose to engage with it consciously, not only will we not know how to be appropriate to it, because there's a level of humility there, because the collective is connected with our ancestors and the wisdom of the earth, but also, so we won't know how to use it well. We won't know how to honor it well, and it often occurs for us as chaotic, and can actually create in people when they tap in to the matrix without being conscious and prepared and doing their own work. You can become overly sensitive. I know a lot of highly sensitive people and empaths who are feeling who really need to help lead us into the future, but who are feeling constantly overwhelmed and overstimulated. And we do our creative spiritual practices to try to not be overwhelmed and overstimulated, because there's a lot of stuff coming at us all the time. So we need to find ways to not allow ourselves to be short-circuited, while to consciously and prayerfully and with absolute like humility to engage with the wisdom of the earth, the ancestors, and the matrix that's around us all the time.
And the piece that I feel is so exciting about right now, even though it's very intense for most of us, and this is why I do Kundalini yoga every day, and Shiloh does her prayers and other things, and she makes up these hand movements that have like body meditations to get our nervous systems in a way that they can handle the amount of information coming into us. But what I'm so excited about, even in the intensity of all that's coming to us, is that I do really feel like this is the time we all have been waiting for. That like each one of us, each one of you, Shiloh, myself, all of us, we came here with these pieces and these parts to bring into form. And it's almost like we've been unfolding, as Sue Hoya Sellers said, we're a constant, you give him the right quote because I'll paraphrase it.
We are unfolding ourselves, creating the future as we go.
And so there's this misunderstanding and this pressure we put on ourselves to try to figure out, like, what should I be doing and what should I be building, and I gotta have these goals and I have to do this, and like all of this, like this criticism too that comes because it doesn't look like what we think in our mind. And I just believe with every piece of my soul that we're not going to find the answers in there. And so the answers aren't in there. And the truth is we are literally elevating consciousness by the unfoldment of our souls, your soul unfolding, my soul unfolding, Shiloh's soul unfolding. We have to have tools and patterns and processes that actually hold us in place to listen to our souls and to our hearts and to tap in, or else it's kind of like being at sea with no map.
It's a kind of a rigor, actually, to really navigate and thrive in this cycle of existence. There's a rigor that's needed, a commitment, a framework, a context, so that we're not just unconsciously engaging with people, situations, and the systems in a way that is not really healthful and is not really creating a future that's sustainable into the next 7 generations. And so in all of our conversation, the thing that we've come up with, which is the same thing that everybody who has this conversation comes up with, that the key is really consciousness. But the question is, how do you arrive there? And the amazing thing about consciousness is it's really unique to each person's path. And that when they're having a conversation with each other, when we're having a conversation with you, then it starts to arise for us in a different way. There's a consciousness that starts to happen that's different.
It's like we come together, I feel like we come together in community, and we come together in sisterhood, and we activate keys or information, like little portals, like there's like, like little, not for real little fairies, maybe little fairies, but like there's this piece where like you'll be in a conversation, with somebody, or you'll be given an inquiry that you didn't have before, and like something unlocks up here that goes, and I was just saying this to Shiloh this morning because we were talking about Sue, talking about the unfoldment of our souls, which is the artwork that we've been using for weaving a new world, is her painting. And it says that, on there, and when we were talking back in the fall, after I came back from my pilgrimage, and you read me that line, I was like, oh my God, like that's it. Like literally we are unfolding in every moment. Yeah. And this is so beyond like law of attraction or making the vision board and the material form, because when we start with the material form, it's like we shortcut and cut off what's the soul's path.
Right, because it's not about what you're going to get. It's not about what you're going to receive. There's a showing up that has to happen. And recently on my trip to Mexico, I finally got to see La Virgen de Guadalupe, which I'm so excited about. It was super powerful. And the breakthrough that I had is something I feel like I've been working on for years on my spiritual path. Because any of you have walked with me at all know that my spiritual path is a constant wrestling with the angel, which is actually where I find peace, is that I'm really engaged in the process of my spirituality. But what happened for me feels like the culmination of maybe years of work to this moment, and it's weird because once you realize it, you realize you knew it the whole time, and then you just finally have language for it. But there's a sense that my only real assignment is to show up for each assignment as it reveals itself to me, and that I have to show up at least halfway. There's a wonderful feminine scripture and wisdom that says, I will meet you halfway in all of your purposes. And it's feminine speaking there. And I always go, oh, okay, what's my halfway? And sometimes the halfway, most of the time the halfway is literally at the edge. I'm way past my comfort zone. I am ready to fall into the abyss. And then she's there. Then the breakthrough is there. Then the conversation is there. Then the painting's there. Then the next offering is there. When I feel like I'm about to fall off, that's when the moment comes. But if I realize that my assignment is to be conscious enough to just show up for that, and what is that in each relationship, in each situation, then somehow everything that I do that for, I then get to trust what happens as what actually is supposed to occur because I've done my part. And so part of why we have these conversations, our whole relationship is based in our own creative spiritual processes. That's what we do when we're together and drink wine and eat food and laugh and have a good time and talk about how we could leave the internet and still survive. And, but really we're talking all the time about how do we show up for these things and what does that look like and what are the patterns. And so each year we work together really creatively and consciously and prayerfully and with ritual and altar building to design a weave for ourselves that will help carry us throughout the context of our lives and linear time and spiritual time. And then we keep checking back in. We say, how did, we make books and paintings, and then we say, wow, how are you doing on that part? And how did that feel for you? And what we notice is that when the people that we're working with don't have a pattern or a plan, then you don't know what to say no to and what to say yes to. But when you have a pattern, and it's not a linear pattern, you now know what goes in there and what doesn't. It's either on your path or it's not. But if you haven't declared your path, then you're basically not on it, and you don't know what is and what isn't on it. My theme this year, although I haven't created my pattern yet, which I'm doing with Christine, is it's the Wheel of Sacred Fire. I have no idea what that means. However, in each situation that I am invited to or confronted with, if I ask myself, does it go in the Wheel of Sacred Fire or not? The crazy thing is the answer is yes or no, not maybe. And just the language, and it arose out of a painting.
Where people, I think, get confused is that we think, okay, if I'm going to be surrendered to spirit and walk my soul's path, that I just can walk freely and just kind of walk around and let what happens. That is not, that's like being on that's don't do that. Don't do that. And it's also not, subscribing to someone else's plan, because no one can actually
make a plan for you.
Plan for you. And, we need, what I've found is that we need symbol and metaphor is the language and the pattern of the heart and soul. And we need context and we need intention. And when you have that, as Shiloh was saying, your life makes sense and you can actually be with it no matter how freaking hard, it is. Like this last year for me, and I'm not kidding, it brought me to my knees at so many levels. And I'm grateful for all of the lessons and the gifts that I received, but they were hard. You can just even hear it, in my voice. But I had my pattern for the year. My mantra for the year was elevate. And it was elevating every part of my life, my consciousness, my business, my relationships, my money, my body. And that's no small mantra. No, I didn't just make that up. Like, I'm going to will myself to happen. It was given to me. This is, I've been practicing this now, as Shiloh has, for many, many years. So I often get my mantra before the new year actually even starts. So this year for me, it's living and giving in grace. is the context. And you'll hear Shiloh talk about this a lot. I'll talk about this a lot. It's actually a word I learned from you, but context is everything. So as I would meet these challenges in my life, which included, birthing a book and releasing a partnership and moving twice, and I mean, I can go on and on about all the things that happened, but I knew it was happening in service to the elevation.
Right. So you had the context, which has it make sense somehow a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Inside the mystery, you're like, oh, that's what that is.
And that's what that year was about. So there might have been other things that my ego would have wanted, like, oh, I would have liked to have, saved X number of dollars, or I would have liked to have, gone back to Italy this last year. It wasn't in alignment with the bigger overall pattern that the universe was trying to guide me on. And because I was able to surrender through this process and these inquiries and this pattern that I created, and this really it becomes a compass, I think, for our souls. It's like, if you don't have a compass, think about it this way. If you don't have a compass that's guiding you through this crazy banana uncharted territory, like, you just get lost. And I don't know how to actually operate in this world today without a compass that's tied to, what do I say yes to? What do I say no to? How do I be in alignment with my soul? How do I make sure this heart is taken care of? And it's a constant communion over the course of the year with that compass that is like your lifesaver.
It is. And the crazy thing really is that we are already all doing that under often an unconscious false framework. So we're talking about creating a conscious framework that really works for us in our relationships and our ministries. But everybody has one anyway. Everybody has one. And so unless you choose to create a different one and to operate from a framework that you're consciously co-creating with the divine, however that occurs for you, then you're operating in the old one, which would be the default setting. And for most people, even brilliant, loving people, it's the default setting that arose for them out of childhood and elementary school and high school and all those tragic things that can happen to us growing up, that our framework about how the universe operates is actually really largely unconscious. And so it will remain that way and actually continue to repeat itself and enforce itself until we move out from under the spell and move out from under the madness into the possibility of magic, which is to co-create. And we don't really know how the universe works, but there are a few things that we know. We know that it's a responsive universe. We know that it's a witness-based universe. We know if we look at a flower, the flower feels our presence. This is not some woo-woo stuff. That's how the universe actually works. It's a really cosmic happening to be here. And so when we consciously co-create with what is here, something else begins to happen and the universe begins to support us in a different way. However, that does not mean the obstacles aren't going to come, because in fact, most sages, saints, mystics, and yogis would say that their path was filled with obstacles. That's how they knew they were on the right path. And so this thought that if your path is completely clear all the time, that is the right path, we could reconsider that. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's smooth sailing for months, even a year, sometimes years. But to really reframe that when challenges appear on your path, that it's in the context of. So Christine was able to look at the things that occurred for her in the context of elevate. Without that context, it doesn't end up making sense. And they aren't threaded together. And that's where the weaving, and that's why we've been talking about weaving a new world in new ways, comes in. Context means context with texture. So it's like the environment inside that something that's occurring inside of. And when you don't know that it's there, then something else is actually operating unconsciously. And so when we create, we weave the context for how we as individual souls, and then how our weave works with those relationships that we have that are sacred. We begin to, as I say, happen to life instead of letting life just happen to us and then reacting. It's a completely different place that allows for there to be a kind of vitality right in the middle of chaos, right in the middle of the fabrics unweaving. You begin to see where you can weave again. But without context, it feels actually like an overwhelm and an assault to be alive on the planet at this time.
And you're unable to make choices. I think that's part of where all the overwhelm comes in. Confusion and overwhelm. And so this time frame now, and why we're together, and we spent these couple hours together, and we were together on the new moon. We were out at a big mountaintop winery with our guys, getting an elevated view for the coming year, this is the month of dreaming. And it is the month of slowing down and tuning in and listening to your heart and to your soul and to the divine and listening to the earth. And like, how do you do that? It's like, and there are real sacred technology that has been on this planet for a long time that, got lost, went behind the veil, went into the woods, like it was almost kind of taken out of mainstream culture to, for like kind of to control people. I mean, if people really knew, think of it, if you really knew, if everyone believed I have the power to co-create my reality with the divine in this earth and be supported and sustained as I unfold myself, and here's the tools to do that, and here's the process, because there actually is a process
without
to go
being
through.
dominant. So it's like that combination, right? Co-creating without forcing and domination and over will.
And so we got to go back and if you're not using the sacred technology that exists for you, I don't know how to actually go through this life and do it in a way of grace and in a way in which you're you're not putting undue pressure. Right. Pressure's going to show up, but how we live our lives now is totally is like how we're going to feel when we're in our 80s, in our 90s. Like we have to weave a new world. And the great thing is that we were given tools. And what I love about Shiloh and I feel like I call it the Arylo Shiloh show, but I'm so grateful. Remembering our first workshop back in 2010 was called The Feminine Superpower of Pause. And I took the sacred technology that I had been given, and she has her sacred technology, and we weaved it together, and we just realized how many, again, similarities there were. And we haven't stopped doing that process individually or in our own communities, since
or in
then.
Our friendship.
In our friendship. And this is the first time Spirit gave us the green light again to come back together and hold space for other women who do want to weave. And we're sitting in the living room today, and I just looked at Shiloh and I said, I can't, we will just be lost out there without sharing sacred technology and having these processes. And for all of us, we need each other, and we need to remember, we need to go through this process, whatever process you go through. It's like you need a process. And this is like that thing that people don't. Like, I'm gonna go to a little visioning workshop and make my vision board for the year and put like pictures on it and then stare at it, and it doesn't work.
Not one part. It's just one part.
It's one piece.
But what we're asking for and what we're asking ourselves to do is really to bring ourselves to a new level of consciousness to weave the future together. And so I would just ask you right now if you are willing to just put your hands on your heart and just feel the space of your heart and connect your heart with your mind, your own imagination, and just feel into that connection between heart and mind, where all this imagination can create something that you haven't imagined before. And that potentially there's a new way that you haven't even been considering about how you have your part in the great weaving and the great tapestry of life. And so as you just sit here with us in the space of this conversation, to just ask yourself, what part are you weaving? What is your part in the weave? What piece, what thread do you hold that is yours to hold? And if you were able to truly get a hold of that thread, really to have the spool in your hands and contribute to the weave, what would be different about your life and the lives that you touch? Just ponder into that. And then imagine if we had a world of weavers who were not just becoming hermits and separating out as we sometimes desire to do, but actually were active, co-creative weavers in the creation of a new fabric, weaving the world in new ways. What could be different for our future? Everything. Thank you for spending some time with us in the sacred container of the conversation and the work that we do together.
So great to be weaving this new world with you. Blessings to you, beloved, on your path.